Hi, this is John Gabriel with the Gabriel Method, and we're pleased to have you with us for this New You in the New Year program. This week is all about stress and emotions, and I'm pleased to share this webinar with you on Heal Your Heart, Lose the Weight, understanding the role of stress and emotions in weight loss. You already know that the conventional approach to weight loss through restrictive diets and calorie counting and extreme exercise doesn't work, and the purpose of our webinars is to provide you with real, holistic solutions that do work. And today I'm pleased to be joined by my good friend and colleague, Paul North. Paul North is an Australian registered psychologist and mindfulness meditation teacher with a diverse work history that covers the areas of disability, mental health, business, and elite sport. Following some health concerns, and with the use of the Gabriel Method principles, Paul lost 12 kilos or 27 pounds. He's a Gabriel Method coach, experienced mindfulness meditation practitioner, and teacher. So, Paul, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time and your expertise. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the relationship between emotional pain and weight gain.
Sure. Look, essentially, we all understand that that people who are carrying extra weight have some background in emotional pain, and of course, every member of the human population does to a certain extent. But the real connecting point here is it has to do with feeling safe. All mammals have as their primary underlying program to look after their own health and well-being and to feel safe. And the body will take some very powerful steps in order to protect itself. So whenever emotional pain is part of a person's life or lifestyle or history, within that body there are mechanisms trying to work to balance that, to protect that being, and to take steps to resolve the situation. Weight gain is actually just one of those techniques that the body can employ, does employ, to counter the emotional pain.
Sure. So, in what way does the body use weight in order to counteract emotional pain or help make us feel safer? How can weight help us make us feel safer?
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, we know, for example, from polyvagal theory, Stephen Porges is a professor in the US, done a lot of work in understanding how mammals feel safe, and one aspect of this is particularly interesting to me. We all have these particular hardwiring in our nervous system, and this hardwiring is connected into what's called the mid-prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain which sits above the eyebrows, and it connects into the eyes, the ears, the mouth. It goes in and it checks in with our heart and even our stomach. So this is why when people have an intuition, a feeling that something's not right, it's actually their brain checking in with their body to see if they're safe. And we didn't even really discover that or see it on brain scans till about 2010. But in relation to weight gain, one of the things that happens right from birth is a baby needs to have certain things in its life to help it feel safe and to help the brain to regulate stress and anxiety. So when we think back to babies, they wake up and they cry and they're scared, they're worried, they need their mother. And what we found is that there's some very specific neurological wiring that connects the mouth to the brain, so that when the baby starts to suckle on the breast, it immediately engenders a sense of safety and well-being. And so the brain regulates itself through this chewing action. And so it's no surprise when people talk about comfort food, or even why we take our boyfriends and girlfriends and respective partners out to dinner, because we actually instinctively know that the very process of eating generally has in itself a comforting and settling effect on our bodies. And so this is just one of the ways in which the body uses food or the processing and the chewing of food to regulate or diminish emotional pain.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And, a lot of us when we use food for comfort and we start to gain weight, for safety reasons, we start to develop a low self-esteem. We start to feel shame and even self-hatred. And I know you talk a lot about that. I'm wondering if you could tell us, how that relates and the problems that can cause.
Definitely, we're going to be going right through that today because it's we are our own worst critic. But I want to, I suppose, touch on this epidemic of shame and self-hatred. And I came across an interesting story. The Dalai Lama was at a conference with an American psychologist called Jack Cornfield some years ago. There was about 2,500 people in the audience. And Jack's talking about self-hatred, and the Dalai Lama stops him and says, wait, what is this thing called self-hatred? And Jack just looks at him and says, well, it's when you're really critical of yourself, you really feel bad about something that you've done, or you're ashamed of something that's happened in your life. And the Dalai Lama's really puzzled. And he then talks to his Tibetan translator, and they go back and forth, and he's still looking puzzled. So he says to the audience, he says, 2,500 people in America, he says, does anybody here know someone who's experienced self-hatred? 2,500 hands go up. And he goes, oh my gosh. And he says, has anybody here actually experienced it themselves? 2,500 hands go up. And he goes, this is a mistake. We actually don't have this. We don't have this in Tibetan culture. But it's a big problem in the Western culture.
That's amazing.
We carry so much shame. We carry so much shame and guilt because, see, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but where we've been taught really incorrectly to motivate ourselves through self-criticism.
Right.
And it's a lie. It's just unhelpful. Yeah, it's just that this is something that's right throughout the Western culture, and it's something in the research that's really coming to light now about shame, the role shame plays in emotional pain, and how overcoming it leads to emotional freedom and well-being. Right.
So what causes shame, basically?
Basically, it comes from negative evaluations. The thing with, I suppose I should just sort of tease out the difference there between shame and guilt. Guilt is I made a mistake, and shame is I am a mistake. And if I said to the audience, if you did something wrong, would you be able to sort of if you did something wrong, if you made a mistake, would you be able to sort of come to me and say, listen, Paul, I'm sorry, I just goofed up there. And most people could say, yeah, because, well, that's guilt, I made a mistake. But it's a lot harder for people to say, because this connectedness with an event, I am a mistake. But that's what shame is. And shame actually causes people to get frozen. It causes them to actually go very, very still and stuck inside. And we often need to help people move through shame back up to guilt, because guilt is actually much easier to work with because it's bringing it back to the behavior.
So we start from this feeling of I am bad to I did something bad to maybe a place of forgiveness where even though I did something bad, people do things.
And that's going to be our journey today, from right through to the compassion, through the acceptance of these things happen, and that's what we're really going to help people to understand that pathway. That's what they'll come away from this today.
So what causes shame? What causes this feeling like it's us that we're bad, that we are a mistake? What causes that?
It's always has something to do with negative evaluations. And growing up in the Western world, because we've been taught historically that pain is a motivator. So we might have come home from school with a poor report card, and someone who's important to us, like a mum or a dad, has looked at that report card. This is just one example.
Sure.
And the look on their face has said it all, or they've said something like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so ashamed of you. This is terrible. Haven't you been doing anything? And right there and then, the person is so devalued in that moment. Now, the parent is actually not a wicked parent. They're expressing their fear out of their concern that this child is not, showing progress. And the only way they know to do that, because that's what happened to them from their parents and their teachers, is to try and motivate through disapproval. So shame always comes from this negative evaluation. Sometimes it happens with a significant person. Sometimes it happens in a public situation. If you think about people who have been ridiculed in public.
Well, I remember when I was 400 pounds, and
Yeah.
I was sitting in a real estate office, and there was a man there conducting his business, and there was a little 10-year-old boy, a little skinny 10-year-old boy, and I thought he had Tourette's syndrome because he's making this kind of jerking, convulsion kind of noises, and I've thought to myself, that poor kid, he's got Tourette's. And as he was walking out, he made this convulsive, jerky snort noise, like, and looked right at me, and that's when I realized that in front of everyone, this is a 10-year-old boy in front of his father, and I'm 3, 4, 5 times his size, I don't even know. In front of everybody, he felt the need to try to humiliate me by saying I was a pig, basically, and making snort noises. He couldn't just sit there. That's something he had to do. And this is something that obviously we get from growing up as kids. I mean, you can imagine what this kid's doing to other kids in the school, but all through our lives, we experience this, where people just look at you, even doctors sometimes, when I was trying to lose weight, and they would just, the second I walked in the room, they just give me this look, because doctors, the predominant medical paradigm is that you just need to eat less. And as we know, there's so much more to it, but that's what they're taught. And so you look at this guy, I walk in, and they give me this look like, oh, this guy is just lazy, doesn't care about himself, just eat less. And immediately you feel that he's not as attentive, why even try, this guy's just, they write you off, and you feel this shame instantly from that look that they give. And I've had that look so many times. And then there's the immediate disconnect. But you carry that shame, especially when you have weight, you carry that shame pretty much everywhere you go. If you're an alcoholic, people only know about it, at nighttime or on weekends or whenever it manifests. But when you have a weight problem, as soon as you walk in the room, that's the first thing that people think, and you feel that.
Yeah, you've just triggered a couple of thoughts for me too, John. One is, I want to come back to that example later when we talk about self-esteem, because it was likely our crazy obsession with self-esteem in the West that actually contributed to that 10-year-old's comment. So I want to come back to that one. And the second thing, you reminded me that in 2010, when I lost the use of my legs, my then 6-year-old was getting teased at school because they were saying that his dad was a grandpa. And he came home to me one day quite upset. He said, Dad, are you ever, because I was using a walking stick, sometimes a wheelchair, and he said, Dad, are you ever going to walk again like a normal person? Like, the kids just keep calling you grandpa. And I totally, you just sparked that memory in me when you talked about a child, how a child can actually shame you.
Listen, I can't even drop my daughter off at school anymore. I got to drop her off like a block away. She doesn't want to be seen with me. I don't know what it is. I just think the kids get to a certain age where you can't do any right. But yeah, no, I pretty much know that one too.
So there's these negative evaluations. There's also well, actually, maybe this is the sort of time to sort of have a little bit of a look at self-esteem, because self-esteem is part of this equation. See, we've done psychology. I mean, being a psychologist, we now understand that psychology in general has done the Western world a disservice, because for the past 30 years we've been pushing, you must have high self-esteem, down everybody's throats. But self-esteem is actually something that's done through evaluating. You have to sort of compare yourself to other people, and if you're better than another person, then you generally have, in your own concept, higher self-esteem. Now, for women, this starts terribly early. They get locked in their number one thing for self-esteem, building self-esteem for women, is how they look. And we know this from all the research. And it begins as early as about the age of 7. They start to worry about, are they thin enough? Are they conforming to these crazy norms that are actually out there perpetuated by media and advertising and fashion? So from the age of 7, women start to come under pressure about their self-esteem in comparison. And so this pressure starts. In men, it starts a lot older, actually, and it's not always concerned just about looks. It's actually concerned also about, am I strong? Am I strong, tough male?
Tough.
Yeah. So these are the things that are in the mix, that are sitting there in the background, contributing or the potential to contribute to our emotional pain and the development of shame.
So what happens is we have these negative evaluations of ourselves that cause shame and then lead to this phenomenon that we call self-hatred. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. So because I want to talk about, I know you talk specifically about how self-hatred affects our weight, and so I'm wondering if we could talk about that a little bit here.
Yeah. Well, like I said beforehand, it's there's one component which we know, which is about the body stepping in and protecting itself. But the other thing is its relationship, and I know you love this because you've so eloquently described the relationship between cortisol in the past and the body's then capacity to stack on the weight.
Yeah.
So when we have excess weight, we know there's usually, and this is what I've found when I've been working with clients, that there's a story in there, some negative evaluation, and some level of hatred, even betrayal by their body. And when we get into that level, then we start to look at the critic. And we are our own worst critic. We call ourselves names that we wouldn't even say or call to people that we don't even like.
Yeah.
And I think anybody listening, if they've got onto the scales and they've seen they've put on weight, or they suddenly can't do up the jeans, or they're running late, or something has happened, they will say really terrible things to themselves. And yet the moment that happens, what happens is the body perceives it as an attack, and the cortisol levels go up. And then we're back into this cortisol relationship and this adrenaline relationship, which is driving the body's systems, which ultimately lead to weight gain.
So self-hatred, basically our body is viewing self-hatred as an attack on the body, and of course the correct stress response when you're being attacked is to elevate your cortisol levels. And as we know, cortisol activates the fat programs and causes you to gain weight. That's one of the primary stress responses, hormonal responses, that causes you to gain weight. So basically, our body's gaining weight because this is an angle that I haven't really thought of myself, and I think it's really interesting, Paul, that you're bringing up, that basically our body's gaining weight to protect us against the perceived attack that we're doing to ourselves.
That's exactly right. This is the thing. We get so stuck into this vicious cycle. Yeah, when you beat yourself up, when you call yourself every name, put yourself down, it's actually not your body that's being attacked, though your body thinks it is. It's your concept of your personal self. But your body doesn't know the difference, so it starts releasing the hormones. It thinks it's getting attacked. But the problem here is, as you've just perfectly identified, you are both the attacker and the victim. You're in the jail cell, and there's the other part of you in the corner, chewing you out and attacking you. So you're really stuck in this cycle of every time this critic comes in and says terrible things to you, those cortisol levels shoot right up.
So Paul, just to jump ahead for a sec, not to jump ahead, but I can't help but jump ahead a little bit because I'm a little bit excited about what you're saying. Very excited, in fact. But if we could get to a place where we were having feelings, regardless of what's going on outside us, regardless of what the media is saying or how we compare with other people, regardless of that, if we can develop this sort of innate feeling of self-acceptance, self-love, our body's no longer going to feel like it's under attack from ourselves. It's no longer going to need the weight to protect itself, to perceive that it perceives it needs the weight to protect itself. It's no longer going to have that perception anymore, and it's going to allow us to lose weight much easier. Is that correct?
That's 100% correct, and that's what we're going to be talking about very shortly as we talk about compassion. But it's the thoughts. Thoughts always come first, and then the emotions follow. Thoughts. So it's important.
Right. So I talk about it. So thoughts are based on opinions and assumptions. Right. So when you have an opinion and an assumption, you end up having a thought, and then the thought creates this whole dynamic. I don't know if you may have heard in some of my seminars, I talk about this story of a guy who is meeting his spouse. It's Sunday afternoon. It's lunchtime, and they were shopping together, and he's meeting his spouse at a nice restaurant. So he's there. It's 12 o'clock. It's a beautiful sunny day. He's sitting outside, and then it's 12:15. She's not there. 12:30. 12:45, she's still not there, and he's getting agitated. And all of these different thoughts are coming through that are based on this basic primary assumption that she's late, she has no consideration for my time. So all this anger is causing this cortisol, and then his fat programs are being activated, all while he's sitting there not even eating anything, just waiting for her. And she shows up, and she says, "How are you?" And then they start fighting, and then she's like, "What's wrong?" And he says, "Well, what do you mean what's wrong? You're an hour late. I've been sitting here waiting. You don't say anything. There's no apology. You have no consideration for my time. It's always the same." And she goes, "I'm not an hour late. We set the clock back from daylight savings last night. Don't you remember? You were just an hour early."
That's exactly right.
Right? And then in an instant, all the negative thoughts, she has no respect for me, no time, blah, 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 all of these negative thoughts that are causing all this incredibly damaging chemistry are gone, and they're gone because you've changed the thoughts and the assumptions. The underlying thoughts and the assumptions have been changed. And when you change those, and to jumping ahead, I know we're going to talk about this, but you change those to feelings of, I am safe, I am loved, I am protected. When you have those underlying thoughts instead of, oh, you're so fat, and oh, you can't do anything, and oh, you're no good, then you're not attacking yourself anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's such a gift if people can understand. Even if they wake up in the morning and they immediately feel sad, if they can just learn to just check a little bit deeper, they'll find there was a preceding thought. And it's that, and so when we change these thoughts, or when we change rather our relationship with these thoughts, that's when we get our emotional shifts. Yeah.
So like for example, what I did for years in my meditations and visualizations is I would imagine every cell of my body just saying at the same time over and over again, "I love you." I would just repeat it over and over. Like they say there's 60 or 70 trillion cells in your body. Just imagine all of them repeating the words, "I love you, I love you, I love you." I would do this over and over. "I accept you, I appreciate you, I forgive you." I would do this over and over again. Every cell just constantly say that, and something happened. Something happened because those thoughts they're just not there. I don't. Whatever happens in my life, I don't think I attack myself anymore. I don't have judgments like I used to, and the stress isn't there, and as a result, my body's much healthier. So that's one technique, and I know you're going to talk about a lot of techniques, and one of them is a meditation technique that I love that you do, which is mindfulness.
Yeah, that's what you've done is you've set the stage. Now that's beautiful because this is where we're heading. So mindfulness is really about bringing our attention to the present moment. And this is what I also just alluded to in a non-judgmental and curious way. So we are always going to have thoughts. In the old days, we used to use techniques which actually would label that as a good thought or a bad thought. We don't do that anymore. They're simply thoughts. We actually don't hold judgment. We just acknowledge their existence, and then we observe them. And in that process, we get not only insights, but we bring ourselves back into the present moment.
I think that, like, when you look back at the Dalai Lama, for example, and why he was so shocked by self-hatred, I think one of the biggest fundamental differences between us in the modern Western world and people in an Eastern world that have a strong meditative background and spiritual background is that we believe, most of us don't even question this, but we believe we are our thoughts. So really what you're talking about, it's a very subtle concept, but a very powerful one. You're talking about creating a separation between you and your thought. That's something that we don't do innately. So we are our thoughts, whereas the Dalai Lama will look at his thoughts like something. He can look at them and just say, those are not me, those are thoughts, and distance himself from those, so that he doesn't have shame or self-hatred as a result of the thoughts. He can think anything he wants, and he's not going to say, that's me, that's my thought, those are just my thoughts. Just like if he had a boil on his foot, he wouldn't say, I'm a boil. He would just say, there's a boil on my foot. It never gets to a judgment of your own essence. So that's why that's why I think it was so alien to him, and for us, why it happens all the time, because our thoughts are our essence. And what you're talking about is creating that separation, so that you're having thoughts, you're looking at them, you're observing them, but you are not those thoughts. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. You've completely nailed it. That's a fantastic insight into why the Dalai Lama is inoculated against such things. That's exactly right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see. It's not that it's the mind's not a bad thing here. What it's done, it's actually designed. It's a survival organ.
Yeah.
And it's designed to flip back and forth between the past and future to protect us.
That's right.
And here's a very simple example. You've had an argument during the day, and let's say you wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning to go to the bathroom or to the dog wake shop. Something happens, and suddenly you're back in your argument, and you're going through all the different ways, and you're even rehearsing things that you should have said, and you might even change the outcome of it. But the thing is, you're back in that argument, and your body doesn't know that. It thinks you're actually in the argument right now. So straight away, cortisol levels and things start to rise, your breathing changes, your level of alertness increases.
So what I just want to point out what Eckhart Tolle said, something that I think was really powerful. He said the only part of us that always exists in the present moment is our physical body.
Mm-hmm.
It's always in the present moment, but our mind is flicking back and forth. Our mind, as you say, to me, the mind is a problem-solving tool designed to keep you safe. That's what the mind is. Whereas most of us think that we are our mind, it's really a problem-solving tool. So it's going to be flicking back and forth, trying to look for solutions to an issue that's happened. All the while, our body is only here in the present moment. So it's constantly thinking we're under attack while we're revisiting this thought that we had from an argument from 3 days ago. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, that's right, because it sees that argument as a threat to its well-being. So it wants to thoroughly understand it and also make sure that either you never have that situation again, or if you do, that you're better prepared and safer.
Right.
And so then it takes you into the future. So it'll either present you with a story of actually seeing that person again, or you'll begin to be worried that you're going to be tired. But the thing is, you'll be in the future worrying about something that's going to happen, and then you might even be thinking about back in the past, angry at that so-and-so for the argument, because if they hadn't had the argument, you'd be back sound asleep now. And you do this flip-flop, and meanwhile the hours tick by.
Yeah. And
the only place that you're going to get back to sleep is in the present moment, is in the one right now, where if you just were able to stop and check, you're in bed, it's beautiful and relaxing and quiet, and you're totally safe, and everything is actually okay.
Right.
So mindfulness, that whole mindfulness practice is about taking opportunities, regular practice opportunities, to always catch ourselves when we think about the past or when we worry about the future, just to come back to the present moment and just check in, to check in. I mean, there's lots of transition moments in a day when we can do this, like when you just before you start the car, you can take one mindful breath and just become present in the car rather than already being in the traffic several streets away trying to get to the doctor's appointment, which is 30 minutes time. Just feel the steering wheel. Feel the sense of you sitting in the seat, and then drive off.
Another really good transition opportunity is right before you eat.
Absolutely.
Because if you're eating from a place of stress, you're going to be eating too fast. You won't be chewing your food. You won't digest it properly. It'll end up being toxic in your system, and all these type of things that we talked about that cause digestive problems. So maybe practice that mindfulness. Just have one or two deep breaths right before you're about to eat. It's going to change the whole experience. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, I like to encourage people to experience their food. I mean, so often, I was going to talk about this a little bit later, but we can do it now, is that so often, all of us could put up our hand at some point, we've eaten a meal in front of the computer or in front of the TV and got halfway through it and gone, oh my gosh, where's my food? Where's my meal? I mean, I still remember this one time in Sydney. I was watching this doctor walk up to the hospital. He was walking really fast. He had his mobile phone in his left hand, stuck to his ear, having a conversation. He had a Magnum ice cream in his right hand, and he was stuffing it into his mouth. And I know that he would have got to the end of that phone call and gone, "Where's my Magnum?" he probably went into the next shop and bought another one, just so that he could actually experience it.
Right.
I just try and encourage people that when they're actually eating, turn the TV off, turn the computer, don't be in front of the computer, but truly, genuinely experience the beauty and the magnificence of the food that's actually before you, because it's so special. It's actually it's an amazing thing that we have this opportunity to have so much food available in our part of the world, to actually deeply appreciate, connect with it as a mindful practice. Not only slows down the process of eating, which gives our brain enough time to catch up and realise when we're full, because if you eat really fast, you override that and you miss that opportunity. And secondly, you get to actually experience it sometimes in a way that you've never experienced food beforehand.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the enemy.
And in tying with what we're saying, it's when you're giving yourself nourishing food, you're eating it slowly and calmly. It's an act of compassion. Is really
Absolutely.
what it is. It's an act of nurturing, love, and compassion. And you talk a lot about self-compassion and the self-compassion wave.
Yes, this is the new thing. So if mindfulness has really been exploding in terms of research. I know there's more than 750 published journal articles on mindfulness in just the last 12 months alone. It's just growing because of the effectiveness on people's health and well-being. It's done. We know it helps people in so many ways. But the way to actually even enhance that phenomena, that observation, is to combine it with self-compassion. And in the last couple of years, it's really been growing. There was 70 plus that I noticed just last year that came out on self-compassion, and that's actually exploding. And the simple reason is because if you just do mindfulness alone without any self-compassion, it still helps. But if you combine it with self-compassion, it becomes really powerful.
Right. So what is self-compassion?
So basically, in a kind of obvious way, there are three parts to self-compassion. One is kindness, actually, showing yourself that same degree of kindness that you'd show another when a mistake happens or something goes wrong. And we know this from even people that are actually that are in grief, that if they actually see another person in pain, those parts of the brain, which we call mirror neurons, they connect with that and they want to try and help that person feel better, so they can generally have some level, it might not be a lot if they're quite depressed, but there's always something there that indicates that they want to try and lessen the other person's pain. In self-compassion, we learn to do this for ourselves, and it's kind of, for some people, it's kind of novel. What? You want me to be nice to myself? And the answer is yes. Yes, we do want you to be nice to yourself, because if we do, then lots of really amazing and wonderful health benefits arise from that. And it just goes back to us because we've often been raised with self-criticism.
Yeah.
So this is what we talked about earlier, is that it's just what we're used to. And there's even a sense that if I'm nice to myself, then maybe I'll become lazy and complacent. Yeah,
exactly. Like you got to whip yourself like a lazy horse, basically. You got to just keep whipping yourself. Whereas if you look at the most successful people in the world, they're not, most of them, not all of them, but most of them are not whipping themselves. They're just full of passion and excitement and enthusiasm, and it just creates on this positive momentum. So the first step is kindness.
The first step is kindness. The second one is acknowledging our humanity. Now, and we all have a shared humanity. And when I've talked to audiences and asked them, what is it that we have in common with every other person on the planet? Not just this room, not just this country or this culture, but every other person on this planet. We get down to these really common, amazing, beautiful human emotions and aspects of ourselves. And the most common one that we all have is we all have imperfections. We actually all are imperfect people. And we all have mistakes happen to us. Yet the sad thing about our culture, and this is what I'll sort of touch back on this with self-esteem, just to sort of compare this, is that we tend to isolate and withdraw when we make mistakes, as if it's something that is not normal.
Right.
It's
we
something
messed up. We're a bad person. We screwed up. We have all the shame and negative opinions start to happen, and all the negative hormonal consequences, basically.
Exactly, without actually appreciating that everybody, every single person on this planet makes mistakes, messes up, has failed, has been poorly evaluated, as well as all the beautiful things we do. So it's, and again, I suppose that just comes back into that whole thing about self-esteem, because we've been raised to always be evaluating ourselves in terms of other people. This is in our culture.
Yeah.
We always have to be seen to be better, stronger, smarter than someone else to have higher self-esteem. This, by the way, John, is what we now know from 30-year longitudinal studies has been driving the increase in bullying and narcissism.
Yeah.
Basically, because we've been so driven to have high self-esteem, we'll do it in general by whatever means we can. And so kids have found that if they bully somebody to a point where they are belittled, then they feel more powerful and it helps them to have higher self-esteem. Or they become so enamored with themselves, even when there is room for improvement, they keep being told, you're so good, you're so good, you're so good, without actually connecting to the broader picture. It creates this myth, this illusion, and this less helpful focus, and so we've had this surge in narcissism.
So we have these misconceptions about self-esteem that are causing huge problems. How do we make this shift toward developing a self-esteem that's independent of how we evaluate ourselves relative to other people, or what other people are doing, or whether or not we make mistakes, etc.? How do we develop this innate sense of self-esteem?
This is the beautiful thing. If we have high self-esteem, we don't necessarily have high levels of self-compassion. But if we have high levels of self-compassion, we generally have high levels of self-esteem. Right. This is the beautiful thing. So the pathway to good levels of self-esteem is actually to have high levels of self-compassion.
Right.
I did say that there were three aspects of self-compassion. The third one actually is mindfulness. Those two things, being kind to ourselves and understanding our shared humanity, is understood in the context of the present moment. And that's the third part, the mindfulness component, the present moment component.
Yeah.
So the physical benefits are just, quite remarkable. We know that it actually heals the heart. And this is how it does that. Just like when you're a critic and you say horrible things to yourself, it produces cortisol. When you say loving things to yourself, especially if you even connect and place your hand on your heart, you begin to produce what's called oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is an amazing neurotransmitter that every woman would know about from who's given birth, because it's one of those very, very powerful neurotransmitters that's responsible for starting the labour, bringing on milk. But not only that, it allows women to basically become superwomen for several days after giving birth. It allows them to heal quicker, to have less sleep, and still be alert and able to attend to their child. And for all mammals, it's the quintessential chemical that's present when we're in love. In fact, you can't bond or have love for somebody without having oxytocin present.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing here is, as soon as your oxytocin levels start to rise, it turns off your cortisol and it starts the healing process. It's a very powerful neurotransmitter.
So that oxytocin that everyone talks about, because I've heard a lot about it. We all hear a lot about oxytocin. It's also called the cuddle or the snuggle hormone. So when you're after you get through the intense passion in a relationship and you get to that cuddly place, it's the oxytocin that does that. What you're saying is we produce our own oxytocin by basically giving ourselves love.
Absolutely. It happens in the context of any love exchange. So even if you're actually patting the dog or stroking the cat, even if we took a blood sample off the dog or the cat, we will find elevations. And it literally starts about 20 to 30 seconds after actually making contact, and it builds for about 20 minutes. It's the same when you hug a person, but even when you have these kind, reflective thoughts about ourselves, it starts to be produced. It's such a beautiful and a powerful chemical.
So how can we bring mindfulness and self-compassion into our lives?
So it's practice. It's like anything else.
Okay.
If you want to actually build some muscles, you've got to do some practice, and the more practice you do, the better you get at it. And the first thing to do is just to start becoming observant. Just catch yourself whenever you find yourself caught up in a worry about something that happened in the past, or something that's happened or something that might be happening in the future. Just first of all become aware of it. And as soon as you become aware of it, that's a beautiful achievement, because you've just fired up the part of your brain that actually will help you to control stress and bring greater well-being into your life. Just by doing that, just by becoming aware of your awareness. This is a very powerful step.
Yeah.
And then we practice it. So we might actually just also set some time each day to just practice becoming present, and we can do that through just focusing on our breath. We will do a little bit of this at the end if we like, or to become fully immersed in whatever it is that you're doing. That could be eating your apple, or going for a walk, or listening to a person as they talk to you on the telephone rather than listening to them and doing your emails and everything else. It's about bringing the full experience into the present moment. This is the first part, just to catch yourself and to come to the present. I should point out too that mindfulness, people shouldn't be concerned, it's not an Eastern practice, okay? It is utilized in the Eastern practices, but I've actually found it in every particular philosophy around the world.
Yeah.
It's not tied to anything. It's actually part of every wisdom culture. Talks about the wisdom of coming into the present moment.
So it's important though, when you say that, to have some time during the day where you specifically practice mindfulness, like, okay, 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to do this for 10 minutes. What I find is when you do that, you sort of make a connection to what it feels like to be very present. And then during the day, when you're at the office, and when you do think about it and become aware of your awareness, as you say, you make a much deeper connection and get greater benefits because you've already established that connection in your practice. Is that right?
That's exactly right. In fact, if we want to be, really scientific about it, if people practiced for 20 minutes every day for just 8 weeks, we could actually measure that change in their brain architecture with an MRI. So we can see the brain rewiring, and that rewiring then serves to protect them.
Like, what are some of the rewiring changes that happen in the brain?
Well, for example, one of the big changes that occurs is a change in the relationship with what's called the amygdala. The amygdala is like the smoke detector in your house. For people that are stressed, it's like they've got a faulty smoke alarm.
And it's always going off.
It goes off all the time. So it goes off when you make toast.
It's a great analogy.
When you practice mindfulness, and we've been able to witness this now in brain scan. Again, back in 2010, 2011, they first saw this. We can show that there's a part in this mid-prefrontal cortex that as soon as it detects some level of stress or threat, it can actually send a special chemical down to the amygdala and tell it to stay calm and stay present, not to start worrying about the future, not to set off all the alarms, but to just stay present and observe. And so that's one of the very powerful neurological changes to the brain. You can actually change your relationship with fear through practicing regular mindfulness.
See, what you're talking about, Paul, rewiring your brain chemistry, to me is the ultimate cure, because really what we're doing all day long, we're wiring our brain chemistry one way or the other. It's like we're computer programmers and we don't know it. And so if we're doing it the wrong way and we're doing it unconscious, we're just wiring ourselves for stress and fear, and the smoke detector's going off all the time, the alarm bells are going off all the time, we're attacking ourselves all the time, the stress hormones are escalating, and we're gaining weight, and that creates even more self-hatred and shame, etc. Vicious cycle that we're living through, and simply because we're not wiring our brains right. Right, and when you practice this mindfulness, really you're just rewiring it. It's just like it's like you're one of those soldering people with a soldering gun and creating different connections over here, and then you're just not having all that negativity, the shame, the hatred, the guilt, the alarm bells. They're not going off. The chemistry that's causing you to gain weight and making you sick is not going off. You're losing weight, and you create a positive momentum, and it's all simply by practicing this mindfulness, as you're talking about, which simply scientifically rewires the way your brain functions. Is that correct?
Yeah. Can you see the beauty in the wisdom when they talk about how we create our own realities?
Yeah, exactly.
it's even there in our it's there in our neuroscience.
Right. Hey, so Paul, we're there's a lot of information that I want to talk about, and that I know you do too. We're running out of time a little bit, so I'm wondering if we can come back to mindfulness at the very end and a little quick practice, which I'd love to do. Yep. But you talk about some other very simple healing things that we can do, such as smiles, laughter, gratitude. I wonder if we could talk about some of those things.
Yeah, I mean the power of a smile. I came across a lady. A story not long ago about a lady who had lost her husband, and she'd been grieving so badly for about 6 or 7 months. She had decided to take her life, and she had gone to the post office to post the letters out to everyone, and then she was going home to do the deed. And in the line, a lady turned, looked her deeply in the eyes, connected, and smiled. And this lady right there and then had a complete change of heart. So much so that she walked out of the post office and she ended up going into Africa and setting up some amazing charities that actually work on doing those micro communities for women and helping them to get trade going, even getting some water systems in villages. Her whole life became transformed, as did the lives of all she touched, by the power of a smile. So smiles are incredibly healing, both to give and to receive. And the other thing I encourage people to do when they're feeling down is go and watch a funny video, because the thing is, you can't actually hold both states of consciousness. You can't actually be sad and feeling down when you're actually laughing.
You can't be in a fearful survival mode and laughing at the same time. So if you're laughing, really you're communicating to your body that you're safe. And if you're smiling, you're communicating to your body that you're safe also. And I know when you talk about rewiring brain chemistry, smiling actually activates areas of our brain that are in charge of safety and happiness and connectedness.
Absolutely.
You can't. Yeah. So really, it's about getting out of a fearful state and a survival state and getting into a state of love, happiness, acceptance, and safety. And one of the best ways to feel safe is gratitude. I'm a big believer in that. That you can't feel in a state of extreme fear and anxiety and a state of gratitude at the same time, because gratitude takes you to a place where you are okay, you are safe, you're safe enough to feel and experience and be aware of gratitude.
I often get people to just, even for a couple of weeks, just as an experiment, to see what happens in their lives. And they always come back with really powerful stories. It's just to write a few things down each day in a diary that they're grateful for. And I remember even last year myself, when I was going through some tough times, I remember it was a really cold day and I had the fire on and I was feeling pretty down, and I decided to put my hand on my heart and I just connected with the warmth of the fire, and I thought, wow, I am so blessed to actually be able to have a roof over my head and a fire going when it's really cold outside. And the gratitude began to open my heart, and it began to heal the grief and the pain that I was feeling. It's a technique that you can actually use when you're quite down, just to connect to anything in your world. You'll find things that you actually can find some gratitude for.
Always. How about the fact that air? How about the fact that air is free? I mean, that's what, because I remember being in a state when I was, when I was morbidly obese and struggling in my profession in a lot of different ways. I remember that was the first place I always came back to. Air is free and abundant. Just imagine for a second if how your priorities would change. Imagine how your priorities would change if air was not free and not abundant. Because all the other things that are bothering you, whether or not you're going to make your mortgage payment in 6 months from now, which Ivy League school your daughter's going to graduate from, your retirement plan, the fact that your knee hurts. Imagine how everything changes in that second if air was not free. So that's where I always came back. And I used to do this visualization where I would just imagine every cell of my body just appreciating, just saying, I am grateful, I am grateful. And I just think that when you're in a state of gratitude, you cannot be in a state of fear, because they're just conflicting, very separate states.
Yeah, and one of the beautiful things I've found, I mean, I don't have any scientific evidence for this, but I have plenty of anecdotal evidence from people who've reported back to me, is the more grateful you become, the more the universe gives you things to be thankful and grateful for.
I believe that's true. My father used to always say, he is truly happy who rejoices in his portion. It was like a biblical saying or something, but it was just basically saying just to be aware of what you have. But I think the best way to do it is just to imagine every cell of your body repeating the words, I am grateful, is a very powerful way. Now, you've got something else that I like a lot, the 4 healing phrases. I wonder if you could talk about that.
Yeah, this is a very simple technique, but a guy called Dr. Matt James did his PhD on this in 2011, so it's definitely evidence-based practice, but it comes from ancient Hawaiian healing techniques, part of what's called huna, and this is a section of it called Ho'oponopono, and it involves just people saying 4 very powerful statements, and you can say this to yourself, or you can even use it in your mind to say to someone else if there's been a problem or an issue. And the 4 statements are, I'm so sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. And those 4 statements have been found that when they're said for a period of time each day, people can say them to themselves as they're going for a walk, for example, or when they're sitting quietly. They've been found to absolutely remove and transform negative emotions and elevate people even in states of depression.
Yeah.
So it's so simple. It's so healing to be able to connect to those 4 statements. And I encourage people, as another little simple technique, just to have when they're having a tough time, to just to connect in. I'm so sorry that you're going through this pain right now. This is challenging. Please forgive me. There were some decisions I made not so good, but you know what? I love you. I really do. I mean, you're amazing. You've done so many things, and I want to thank you for this opportunity, to have had this experience and to learn from it. So you can just have this little conversation with yourself around those 4 statements. It's very powerful and very simple.
Well, I think just having it to yourself, just saying the words, even without the sentences after it, just those words, because I've done it, I just think that your body kind of forms sentences around it. You don't even have to make an effort. Just,
it
I'm
does.
sorry, forgive me, thank you, I love you, thank you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. You just keep saying it like a mantra, everything changes. Yeah.
That's exactly right, and that's how it can be used. And you're correct. You will adapt little parts to it. You'll add little insights to it if you feel to. But just those 4 sentences, very powerful, very helpful.
And you're saying it like when you had a bad food day, or that's probably a good thing to do, maybe even while it's happening.
Yeah, well, again, what's going to happen is some thoughts are going to come in. You'll use your mindfulness. You'll connect to, oh, they're my thoughts. Then you can use the Ho'oponopono. Just use those 4 statements. Say
Yeah,
them over to yourself a few times. You will
yeah.
transform that experience.
You will. There's no question. It
Yeah.
sounds like you wouldn't. It sounds like you're giving up the reins, if you're forgiving yourself and then you're just going to binge more. But the reality is something changes in you. It's almost like when you look at when our body feels stressed and out of control, it's almost like a rebellious child that feels out of control. And
Mm-hmm.
when you try to control the child, they can't go out or whatever. They're going to sneak out the window in the middle of the night and go out. They're going to figure out a way to get junk food. They're going to do things that are rebellious. And our body's a little bit like that. But the minute you change that, just with a kid, and say, look, you can do what you want, but I love you. I just want you to know that I'm your friend and I believe in you and I trust you. Then the kid's less likely to sneak out the window. It's less likely to have junk foods. The body's the exact same. So you're going through this kind of rebellious junk food binge thing, and you think if you say, I forgive you, I'm sorry, while it's happening, it's going to get worse. It's not going to get worse. The body's going to say, well, let's just back off a little bit from this experience where everything's okay. Maybe we don't have to
Yes,
sicken ourselves with excess.
that's
Yeah,
exactly what happens. That's exactly what happens.
that's what I've
Yeah.
experienced. Yeah. So let's talk about loving kindness meditation.
Yeah, I thought if you like, we could just do just to finish up with a nice little short one, just to take
I'd
us
love
through
to.
some of those steps. So,
I'd love
with
to.
that in mind, what I would say to people who are listening, if you are driving a car, perhaps
Yeah.
not the time to do it unless you want to pull over.
Yeah.
But for everyone else, please enjoy. I always
Well,
like to
not
get
everyone
people
else. If you're
to.
flying, a plane, also don't listen to this. But everybody
Yes.
else.
I
Yeah.
do like people to generally do something like this sitting. Lying
Yeah.
down is okay if it's first thing in the morning. Otherwise, you can fall asleep, and that's
Yeah.
not what we want. We want to actually have an expanded awareness. So if everyone can just make sure they're just sitting comfortably, and I just sometimes use my little Tibetan bells to start and to finish. And so if we can just bring our awareness now to our body. And just let the mind wander through and just see if there are any areas of tension that you might just choose to let go of, just to observe and let go of. And just let the shoulders drop. Let the hands rest comfortably in the lap. And let the belly soften. And just let the wise and loving heart open. And just let the breath become natural. And just come back to yourself, back to this moment, the only moment that there ever is. And what you might find as you're becoming still and the mind is quieting, and you're bringing awareness to just the gentleness of your breath. From time to time, thoughts may pop in this process, and that's perfectly normal. And what we do when that happens is we simply just acknowledge them. And then we bring our awareness back to whatever it is that we're doing at that moment. In this case, it might be focusing on the breath. On another occasion, it might be doing the dishes. So we acknowledge the thought, but we don't judge it. We simply allow it, and we come back to whatever it is we're doing. So just becoming aware, just gently aware of the breath as it rises and falls. And even then, sometimes as we become aware of our breath, the breath likes to change, and that's perfectly okay. In fact, I often find it helpful to focus just on the pause at the end of the breath. Just to notice that pause. And gradually, with practice, we can ever increasingly and more quickly come to a state of mindful calm and stay in this present moment. So just as you sit there, tuning into all these amazing things that are in your life, just saying thanks. Thanks to the universe, or thanks to spirit, or a sense of God, or even thanks to yourself. And as you connect with that gratitude, you might find that you feel a sense of warmth, even space, opening within your heart. And that's beautiful. That's tapping into the love that we really are. But sometimes when we're feeling a little down, that's tricky to connect. So just whatever is there is fine. Whatever is there is perfectly okay. So let's help that feeling to build now. What I want you to do is to think about one or two people in your life who you're not in conflict with, who have done something kind for you in the past, and probably you have too. They might have given you a meal one time, or you spent the night there, they've taken you in, or they've lent you some money, or they've helped you with the gardening. But there'll be friends, there'll be dear people in your life who you can share your stories with, and they care deeply about you. And I want you to think about that person and just consider that maybe they've had a bit of a tough time. And straight away you would probably find yourself wanting to send them some compassion. And so as you think about those one or two people, just saying to them, may you be happy. May you find some freedom from your present difficulties. And may you find peace. May you be at peace. May you be at peace. And just feel yourself sending them some love and goodwill in their direction. These beautiful people. Now I want you to imagine that you're now a person that's fallen on a few tough times. And I want you to imagine that that one person or those two people, they're looking at you. And they're looking at you with concern and kindness and a deep sense of love. And they're sending thoughts back to you. And they're saying, may you find some happiness. And may you find relief from your suffering. And may you find peace. May you be at peace. May you be at peace. And just feel their love and compassion coming to you, entering into your chest and heart area, that area expanding and feeling so beautiful and accepting and warm and restorative and healing. You might even find that some of those other emotions are starting to dissolve in the presence of this love and beautiful feelings. And then feeling these feelings, just say to yourself, may I be happy. May I find some relief from this suffering. And may I be at peace. May I be at peace. May I be at peace. And now, as a gift to the world, just allowing that beautiful peace and presence that's inside you to flow back out to others, to all of humanity, if you like. And just saying to them, may all beings be happy. May all beings find freedom from suffering. And may all beings be at peace. May they be at peace. May they be at peace. Just bring your awareness now back to the room or where you're sitting. Just have a bit of a stretch. Opening your eyes. And I hope you enjoyed that little exercise. It's just an example of what can be done.
Paul, I found that to be quite fabulous. And what I noticed is just an instant shift in my feelings and my demeanor and the way my whole body is thinking about the day. And what's amazing about a meditation like that is, we were probably doing that for less than 10 minutes. And I can tell you that the difference in my stress level, and I'm sure the people listening too, is night and day.
Yes. Well, love is such a transformative energy, and really that's what that whole meditation is conveying. I think probably one thing I did want to say to people is nobody ever hated themselves thin, okay? But you can love yourself back to perfect health and well-being.
How do we take this into our lives? What are some practical steps so that we can get this in our lives, so that we're not having the stress and the alarm bells, and we're not having the chemistry that's causing us to eat and gain weight and be under attack? How do we make this real? How do we bring this into our lives? What should we do?
Start by being gentle with ourselves. Understand that we're, one of the most supportive things that another person can say when we're struggling is "me too." And I want to say to everybody on this that's listening to this, me too. Because I I've had my own journey and I've struggled at times too, and I've used all these techniques to actually heal. And I know that we'll use them in times of, stress in the future. It doesn't mean I'm impervious either. I practice these things regularly, and I practice them even more regularly when things are challenging, as life can throw us curveballs. So start by being kind to ourselves. Understand that we all have these imperfections, and try and spend so much time in the present moment, remembering some of the things that we've talked about today. I'm just wondering whether, if people are interested, I could probably even make up a short little, 10 to 15 version, a separate one of what we just did, that they could access then freely.
Could you do that for us, Paul?
Definitely. And then they can just use that as part of their practice too, or call on it whenever they need to.
So we can just we can listen to this. It'd be great. The one that you did was perfect. It was about 10 minutes. If you could make one up that's just 10 minutes for us, and we could just take that and just maybe decide that once a day we're going to listen to this. I might even add it to our action steps. If once a day, if we could listen to your meditation, that would be fabulous.
Yep. I'll do it. No problem.
Love it. Paul, your information is so beneficial for us. It's so healing and transformative. And just even talking to you and just having this experience right now, my whole system feels totally different. So the way you're explaining to us how stress hormones are causing the problem, and how we constantly are elevating the stress hormones through these repetitive judgments and negative talk, and how these simple
Mm-hmm.
techniques are so instantaneously transformative in the way our brain chemistry works and our hormonal system works. It's truly essential and really awesome work that you're doing. So I can't thank you enough for taking your time to spend with us and to share your wisdom and your experience and your knowledge and your expertise.
Thank you so much, John. I really enjoy connecting with you and being of service. So the honor is also mine. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. As you can see, Paul's mindfulness, meditation, and compassion-based approach is so powerfully transformative. I hope you love the information, and I hope you practice the meditation on a daily basis. It will truly, truly transform your emotional state, your hormonal state, and allow the weight to just melt off of your body. So that's it for today, and I'll speak to you very soon. Take care.